Hello and welcome to another Diecast Restos Custom. I'm Jason and this is the Matchbox MB142 Peugeot 205 Turbo 16. It was released in 1984 in the non-US Rest of World lineup and lasted until 1992. My custom will improve on the original Matchbox design, replicating Peugeot's factory rally livery. The exact car I'll be emulating is this, the 1985 Monte Carlo Rally winning number 2 205 driven to victory by Ari Vatanen. I'll refer to this image again later on during decal application. The decals were sent to me by Vitor from Scratch Diecast. He makes all of his own decals and 3D parts, and you can see some of his work in the top left of the screen, including a 205. Check him out on Instagram at Scratch Diecast and show him some love. Thanks again to him for sending me these decals. Now my casting isn't in a terrible condition, but the plastic base has yellowed a little. Aside from that, it was very solid. There's plenty of availability for these castings as they lasted for so long in the ROW range. This sort, with the blue 205 numbering on the sides, remained unchanged for 5 solid years between 1985 and 1989. The Peugeot 205 Turbo 16 or T16 was a 1984 homologation special. Group B rally regulations required 200 road-going examples of an entry to be built, based on an existing production road car. The T16 shared basically nothing with the regular production car. They did share a 1775cc engine, but this was transversely mounted and moved to the rear. Now, instead of a front-engined front-wheel drive car, it was a rear mid-engined four-wheel drive car. It borrowed the gearbox from the Citroën SM, and the engine block was a specially adapted diesel block with a 16-valve head. As the name suggests, it was turbocharged, with the 16 referencing the valves. The body was built by French firm Uliez. They took the standard 205's 3-door body shell from Peugeot and cut the entire rear section off. A transverse firewall was welded between the B-pillars, and a tubular and sheet metal frame made up an entirely new rear. The front also received a tubular frame to carry the suspension. Completed bodies were then delivered to Peugeot Talbot Sport, ready for competition, while the 200 road-going versions were sent to Simca for finalising. The T16 made its World Rally Championship debut at the 1984 Tour de Corse, before it won its first event later that year in the Thousand Lakes Rally of Finland. Now every good custom deserves a solid set of wheels. I've chosen these as they replicate the steel wheels of the real car pretty effectively. After the Thousand Lakes Rally, driver Ari Vatanen won each of the 2 remaining events he entered that year, the Rally San Remo and the RAC Rally. This set Peugeot in excellent stead for 1985. Sure enough, Vatanen won the first race of the season, the Monte Carlo Rally, with that livery set to be replicated on this casting. He then won the following rally in Sweden, before teammate and compatriot Timo Salonen won in Portugal. Peugeot then upgraded the T16 to the Evo 2 version, which has far more visible aero attached to it, including a huge rear wing and front-end winglets and a splitter. Salonen won 4 more rallies that year, earning himself the Drivers' Championship title, while Peugeot won the Constructors' Trophy. It was a similar story for 1986, which saw 6 more rally victories, another Constructors' Championship, and the first of 4 world titles for Juha Kankkunen. With Group B banned from 1987, Peugeot's success in the category meant that the 205 T16 was one of the most prolific cars of the Group B era. They managed to fend off strong competition from Audi and Lancia, who had been the most competitive constructors until that point. Now, perhaps a word on the original 205 that inspired the Group B monster. While the underpinnings were almost entirely different, the exterior of the T16 at least did bear some resemblance of the 205. Introduced the year prior to the T16 in 1983, The 205 replaced the 104 Super Mini, though that continued on in production until 1988. It was also the successor to the 104-related Talbot Samba, which was discontinued in 1986. Often thought to have been designed by Pininfarina, designer Gerard Welter claims that it was actually an in-house design. The convertible 205 was designed by Pininfarina. What Car named the 205 as their Car of the Year for 1984, while Car Magazine named it as the Car of the Decade in 1990. It was hugely popular across Europe, and during its production run that lasted until 1999, it never received a major overhaul or facelift other than some minor touches. Not only did it spawn the T16, it also had the high-performance GTI version as an option. These had 1.6 and later 1.9 litre tuned engines, with later varieties also receiving leather interiors and all-round disc brakes. Here I'm crafting some homemade mud flaps for my T16. These are strips of plastic that I've cut from a food container, potato salad in this case, obviously washed out. I will cut these down to size and paint them red. Peugeot also created the low-cost rally version of the 205. These were stripped back models that had no soundproofing or interior luxuries in order to reduce weight. Rallies received a pokey 1.3 litre engine while still weighing just 794 kilos, 1,750 pounds. They were Spartan yet cheaper to own and run than a 205 GTI. They had distinctive Peugeot Talbot Sport's quad colour stripes displayed across the bodywork. Peugeot's 106 was released in 1991, which ran concurrently with the 205 for the next 8 years. Peugeot's unique strategy intended for the 106 to take the lower end of the 205 range, while 1993's 306, which had replaced the 309, would take the top end sales. This strategy failed, and so the 206 ultimately replaced the 205 rather belatedly in 1999. It kind of paid off though, as the 206 went on to become the best-selling Peugeot model of all time, with over 8.3 million units built. With all of the shading using Citadel Gloss and Uln Oil complete, I can now prepare to affix the decals supplied by Vitor from Scratch Diecast. He has produced some excellent water slides to match those decals applied to the real car. I start with the front, setting the lower bonnet shell lettering and occasionally seen Michelin sponsorship. The quad colours of Peugeot Talbot Sport feature prominently on this car. The first to go on is the bonnet set. These follow the contours of the bonnet into the recess of the real thing, so I use the shallower cast scoop of the casting as a guide. The Monte Carlo Rally placard is placed on the opposite side of the bonnet. Next, I have some fiddly small shell logos to fit to the wings. Some more colourful decals are applied above the front wheel arch. These are a bit awkward to place as they wrap around the curves of the body. After that comes a large light blue decal that hosts some sponsorship in ahead of the rear wheel. This is probably the most tricky of all due to its size. It needs to negotiate the sills, wheel arch and meets the opening rear hatch. Plenty of water is required to get it to stick. Last on the side of the main portion of the casting is the number 2. Onto the rear hatch, and onto that goes some more colour, extending the Peugeot Talbot Sport stripes that meet with the light blue on the main body. And on the C-pillar is another shell and Michelin sponsorship. The quad colour stripes make another appearance on the rear, and now there are only 2 more decals to apply, aside from everything on the right hand side of course. By applying the Peugeot wording, I've managed to displace the stripes, so I'll shift that back into position. Lastly, the 205 Turbo 16 lettering attaches to the right side of the hatch. With all that rolled out and setting, here's a brief look at the complete decals. Now the entire thing is coated with Mr. Mark Softer solution. You may remember from my Matchbox Peugeot Quasar Restoration Plus that I mentioned that the Quasar concept car was based on the 205 T16. It shared the same underpinnings with a radical new body. I set out both side by side in the video's closing credits, so make sure you stick around to see them together. Next, the casting is coated with clear to protect all of those fresh decals. The wheels are a bit loose sat within the arches, so I've got some 1.1mm inner diameter tubing that I cut down to size to act as spacers. This will prevent the axles from sliding side to side, as the pieces are thicker than the slots to allow for the axle to pass through. Here they are fitted as I begin to put it back together. Into the casting first is the rear hatch transparency. I had to grind down the rivet earlier with my modified drill bit, but there's still enough purchase on the existing rivet that it holds the glass in place. The main compartment transparency is held in position by the interior plastic. I've detailed the engine with chrome and added a touch to the steering wheel. Finally, the base slots onto the body by a slot and tongue fitment at the rear and a screw at the front. This is how my Matchbox Peugeot 205 Turbo 16 was looking before I decided to improve on the recipe. As nice as the tampos are on this, it could always do with a little more added realism. I've seen several customs on the 205 T16 that turn it into the wild Evo 2 version with its wacky wings, but few honouring tradition with an Evo 1 replica. Well, thanks to Vitor at Scratch Diecast and his decals, I've managed to transform it into this. I've inset images of the real 205 T16 this is based on, so you can see just how good his replica decals really are. I've tried to bring it to life with some Citadel enhancing the existing cast lines. It means the front has far more grille detailing, the doors have definition, and the intakes are much more obvious. It's definitely improved the rear hatch too. I've added in some custom made mud flaps, courtesy of a potato salad tub. With the wheels, I've tried to create as close a match to the original as possible. I think that they're pretty effective. I've done all the usual odd things like cleaning up and polishing the windows, filled in the light details, as well as respraying the base to refresh it. But thanks again to Vitor for supplying the decals, and be sure to check out his Instagram page. Also, if you'd be so kind to drop the video a like and subscribe if you haven't already. All that leaves me to say is thanks very much for watching, and I'll see you again for the next one. Bye for now.